Pushing his luck. Chapter 1. Rachel Daly carried the cup of tea carefully into Henry's living room. Her younger sister Jessica was sitting cross-legged on the rug in front of the gas fire, listening enthralled to the old man's latest fantastic story. Henry Lambert was better entertainment than the television at times. He had the knack of turning the most ordinary event into the most extraordinary, the most boring of things into the most exciting. Rachel had always loved Henry's stories, ever since she was Jessica's age. She was 4 years older than her little sister, and at that age she had believed every single word Henry uttered. It was only recently that she started to realise that most of his tales were made up to amuse the children who lived in the flats. It didn't matter, of course. Henry was such a sweet old man. Rachel was sure everyone loved him. She carried his favourite china teacup and saucer carefully. Real china, he had once told her, given to him by the Chinese emperor himself many years ago. And the American Indian chief had a headdress of eagle's feathers that reached right down to the ground, Henry was telling Jessica. I remember how his wizened old face crinkled as he put away his tomahawk and handed me the pipe of peace. Tea, Henry, Rachel said softly, smiling at the expression of her little sister's face. Jessica adored listening to Henry's stories. Everyone was different. He never told the same story twice. Thank you, my dear, Henry smiled appreciatively. He was over 80, with silver hair and a small white beard. A silky cravat was knotted at his throat, a gift from a Persian prince he'd once told her, and she'd believed him until she spotted the label which read, Made in England, hand wash only. I've put the pie Mum made you in the fridge, Henry, Rachel told him. It only needs warming up. That's very kind, said Henry, sipping his tea. This is a nice cup of tea. Do you know, I once visited a tea plantation in India. We have to go now, Henry, Rachel apologised. Jessica, come on if you want to go to town with Mum. Jessica pulled a face. Oh, but I want to hear about the tea plantation. Another time, smiled Henry, reaching into a little silver box he kept at his side. Now let me see if there are any pennies for you. Did I ever tell you that this silver box was once part of a great treasure brought up from the wreckage of a pirate ship at the bottom of the sea? Here, 20 pence to buy some sweets. Jessica glanced hopefully at Rachel. Can I? Rachel wrinkled her nose. Henry, you shouldn't. Of course I should, he said, pressing the coin into Jessica's hand. I'd rather give my money to my friends. Don't want that nephew of mine getting everything, do I? Rachel smiled. Go on then, Jessica. Thank you, Henry, Jessica said politely, taking the coin. And I'd love to hear about the tea plantation and the pirate ship another time. They were interrupted by someone knocking on the door. Rachel glanced at the old man. Is your nephew coming today? What day is it? Saturday. Henry shook his head. No, not today. Gerald only visits me on Sundays. Every Sunday without fail. Checking on his inheritance, he added with a wink. Do you know, he'd love to see a copy of my will. He wants to make sure I'm leaving all my pennies to him and not to a cat's home when I go. Henry, don't say that, Rachel frowned as she opened the door. A man in a boiler suit with the words ACE Plumbing Services printed on the pocket stood there, holding a large bag of tools. Plumber, love, he said, and made to step in. He was stocky with stubble on his chin and tattoos emerging from the neck of his open shirt. Just a minute, Rachel said, holding on to the door. Henry, are you having some plumbing work done? The old man frowned. No, I don't think so. Rachel stood her ground. She'd heard about bogus tradesmen calling on old people. He doesn't need a plumber. The man produced a sheet of headed notepaper from his top pocket. His hands were tattooed too. Maybe he doesn't, but the flat below does. There's water dripping down their walls. There's a leak up on this floor somewhere. I've got to find it. Rachel narrowed her eyes, still feeling slightly suspicious. Well, OK then, she agreed, moving aside as he went through to the kitchen. She whispered to Henry, We'll stay and keep an eye on him, shall we? Henry nodded. That's very kind. You can't be too careful. He winked at Jessica. Could be the gold robber back to get his loot. Jessica's eyes popped. The gold robber? Henry spoke in a stage whisper. Didn't you know a notorious gold robber once lived in this very flat? He stole £500,000 worth of gold bars and they've never been recovered. Rachel raised her eyebrows, vaguely aware that there was some truth in this particular fantasy. Local people still talked about the gold robber who used to live in this area. I thought the thief was in prison, she remarked. He could have served his time and be out by now. It must be more than 10 years since the robbery, Henry said quietly. I remember I'd just sold my house to make way for the new road coming through, and this flat was empty because the previous tenant had gone to prison. It needed some tidying up, I can tell you. Jessica lowered her voice. Do you think the gold could still be hidden in here? If only, Henry chuckled. No, I don't think so. Mind you, I've certainly looked, just in case. But £500,000 worth of gold bars would take up a lot of space. I'm sure I would have tripped over it by now. It must be hidden in a very secret place then, Jessica murmured. Henry leant forward in his seat, whispering, Maybe there's a map which will lead us to where it's hidden, buried somewhere. A treasure map, Jessica murmured, staring into the old man's eyes. You could hide a map anywhere.